What the heck did we just watch? The New Jersey Devils fall 3-1 down in the second round playoff series at home at the Prudential Center against the Canes. We talk about how they get out of this deficit and if they can make a series of it coming up next. Yes, sir. It is the Devil's Puck Luck podcast, and I am one of your two hosts, Adam Armbrecht. Obviously, not shown here today is going to be one Danny McDonough. Listen, we are going to be firing up our coverage of this team. We're going to be diving in, obviously, on all things New Jersey Devils, but it's been a bit of a rough go here. Got to go to the last two games at the Prudential Center. Got to see an amazing 8-4 victory, obviously, that pulled the Devils right back, just like we saw in round number one, down 2-0, going home and boom, stepping up and showing that it's going to be a challenge. Obviously, in the first round series, it's reversed where neither team was winning at home early in that series. But the Devils got that big victory. 8-4. Vitek was in goal. And no, I'm not going to sit here and talk about Vitek's performance in the way that maybe a lot of fans think I should. And if you're wondering why would that be the case, I'll tell you why. Because this was about as disappointing a game that we've seen from the Devils in the entirety of these playoffs. You're down 2-1. You're at home. And you have everything in front of you in terms of making this a very dangerous series for the Hurricanes as they go back to Carolina. And instead, you come out, you get the early goal. So Jack Hughes gets the team on the board. You like that. Everything after that moment, guys, I mean, what an absolute disaster from a competitive standpoint for this New Jersey Devils team. Getting outplayed is one thing. That you live with. If you're going to get beat because the team is better, which Carolina very well may be, right? That's fine. But I'm just talking about laziness, lackadaisical play from most of the New Jersey Devils. And we can go chapter and verse here around some of the guys that have been incredibly disappointing in this series and maybe even for the playoffs overall. But I will talk about Vitek in net because we were there, sat in the upper section for this one. Nice front row, felt good. Danny was down low with a couple of friends, or I should say, significant others, and got to see this unfold in a way that, yes, are there goals there that you don't like that Vitek gives up? Does Vitek not necessarily look comfortable between the pipes? 100% agreed. No two ways about it. I'm going to talk about it a little bit at a high level in a moment. But you cannot be a team like the Devils up 1-0 in a game, knowing that you're trying to get even in the series and then make some of the mistakes that they did. And yeah, Luke Hughes was one of the guys that made mistakes here, right? He had a few errors. He had some great plays as well. We've talked about before leading up to this, the dynamic that he brings from a defensive player perspective. Nobody else has that same ability that he does. It's dynamic. We know about him on the power play. Like they're the things that we know are going to be good for him, right? He's going to be a key piece going forward. Great. Did he make a terrible neutral zone 2-line pass that led to the goal? Yes. But I got to tell you, man, you can't sit here and you can do two things. You can say, one, first two games against the Rangers, Devils did not play good hockey, and Vitek was not solid. He didn't look comfortable. Likewise, you can say in last night's game, yes, Vitek gave up goals, and I thought he looked comfortable to start. And then there was a moment when he had a great butterfly save where it was like, hey, these are little moments for Vitek. But ultimately, it was not a good performance from him. And also, the team does not play well when he's in net. Does not play well. And Danny and I talked about this coming into it, that the expectation was Vitek was going to start game number 4, and it was universally agreed on that that was a mistake, and you should be going back to Akira Schmid because the eye test tells you that he's your best bet to have success. Now, the other thing when it comes to Vitek that we discussed coming into this series was, hey, into these playoffs, I should say, was this is a team in the New Jersey Devils that don't have a lot of experience, right? Couple of veterans on the team, but by and large, they do not have experience. And here's the problem when it comes to Vitek. Because now the experience is piling up, right? He is 27 years old. Doesn't mean that there isn't still growth for him here. But when you look back at the 22-23 season, stats up in front of me here, 33-11-4 with a 2.45 goal against and 911 save percentage with 3 shutouts. And then you turn the page into what the playoffs have been for him. It's a problem, right? Because we said this is a big test. And a guy like Akira Schmid, who's young, who's a rookie, who is just starting his trajectory, you can take some of these lumps and then also still look at shutouts and say, hey, the team's playing well in front of him. And when called upon, he makes some critical saves. And those things are important. But now Vitek, with 7 games played and 4 games started, he's 1-3-0, 21 goals against, a 4.64 goal against average, and an 8.25 save percentage. And from Washington in 2021 and 21-22, you looked at it and said he had 1 game, he started it, gave up a goal, 4 saves, it was minimal, 13 minutes total ice time. And then for Washington again the following year, 2 games, 1-1, 7 goals against, 4.21. It's gotten worse this year. The bigger sample size is getting worse for him now. And the save percentage is absolutely brutal, right? I mean, because you can paint different pictures sometimes depending on what you're seeing when you watch these games. Go back to game number 3. I had never seen, I know we've talked about it, I'm not trying to beat him up. But we talked about, I've never seen a goaltender jump in the air to try to make a save on a mid-chest shot. Did it multiple times in that game. There's an uncertainty. He's not sure of himself between the pipes. It's a concern. So, yes, I'm being critical of him. Yes, I think that there's something here telling you that in the big picture, what you need to accomplish going forward may include determining if Akira Schmid can be the number 1 goalie going forward. You can feel comfortable with that and having still Vitek be there as the number 2 potentially. Or do you need to make a move here? Do you need to switch something up? Because it's playoff hockey and you have not been able to rely on your regular season starter. So that's been a problem. I'll tell you the other guy's been a problem. And that's Jesper Bratt. Danny and I have been talking about this. Miles Wood, who has had a much better series and had a better playoffs than maybe we thought about him at the end of the regular season. He was the ire of Danny's eye and a lot of Devils fans, and rightfully so. We understand that. But Jesper Bratt, for a guy that, wants to go to market and is going to come to the table and say, hey, I want 7.5, $8 million or more, and he wants to earn that paycheck. This ain't been the series or the playoffs to prove or validate that. It has been a rough run, to put it mildly. Looking at Jesper's numbers here right now, we talk about what he's accomplished in these games. And I know that this isn't the end all be all, but it starts to be when you look at some of the lines for him, right? The 4-0 shutout victory against the Rangers, he was a +2. Outside of that, he also had it in the 3-1 victory. A lot of negatives on the ledger for him. He's -2 for the postseason, and that's neither here nor there. Although some of the numbers somehow seems askew. But the careless play from him, the lackadaisical play, the lack of attention to detail, it's been excruciating. And we're going to talk about this offseason, how the Devils need to greatly evaluate the return of Timo Meier and getting him on a contract, a player who has the skill set that I think fits into it and had a nice little bounce back performance. As we check the old hair follicles here, looks like the green screen might be doing some work for us. You want him back. What else does this team need? Where do they need to improve? And even if the market tells you that Jesper Bratt is only worth $5 million, not $7 million, or only worth $6 million, not $8 million, whatever the number may be, is there a price point when it matters? Or ultimately, do you need to be able to allocate that money to other players, contributors, or high-level guys? Has not been a good playoff run for Jesper overall, and it's been a very bad series against the Canes. So it's pretty brutal. And the team just didn't show up for that game, plain and simple. And the team doesn't seem to want to show up in front of VTech. Now, can this team go down to Carolina and win game number 5 and force the issue? Yes. How do I know that? Because they just won 8-4, right? This team is capable of putting up goals in volume. The concern that I think I have just for this team in these playoffs is we've seen the pendulum here, right? When we think about this schedule and the postseason and looking at it and saying, in the games they've lost this year, I mean, look at it. They've been outscored in the 3 games that they've lost this series. They've been outscored 17-3. And then they put up 8 goals in 1 game, but gave up 4 to do so. Go back to the series prior against the Rangers. We know, listen, you won the series, took them 7 games, and we love it. It's a big check mark for this franchise, this young franchise, and this new iteration of them. But you lost 5-1, 5-1, 5-2 in those games. The wins that you got had some really nice shutout victories, and that was with obviously Akira Schmid between the pipes and an empty net goal there in the 3-1 victory. 2-1 in overtime for the first win of the series on the road. It's just, listen, there's 2 elements to this. The one element is it's a young team, and they're still learning, and they're still growing, and they're going to take their lumps. And you're here now, and you want to see a level of consistency. It's not about the wins and the losses. It's about the consistency. The other high-level thing is the Devils have achieved exactly what you would have wanted as this season was unfolding. Were they ahead of the curve on the timeline? Yes, they were. But you made the playoffs, number 1. You checked some franchise record-setting boxes along the way. You won a playoff series. You beat the Rangers. Those are all incredibly positive things. And nothing that happens here or that has happened here, the Devils can go down to Carolina and lose in 5. That can happen. And it's not going to change how I feel about this team overall. The playoff hockey, though, is changing how I feel about certain players on this roster. And that's where I think we are now, right? We're going to step back and recalibrate on how he felt about performances throughout the year and what this team achieved, and then look at free agency and look at the draft and talk about all the different things that this team can do now going forward and how you recalibrate a little bit and adjust. But these 2 series are a proving ground, right? Jack Hughes didn't need to prove it, but he proved it, right? He is that guy. Akira Schmid is showing it, right? That there's something there for you to get excited about. Veterans, when we talk about players that you'd like to retain or that have value that are still going to be under contract, you can start to look at certain players across this roster. And if we're just doing the math on it, right? Palat stepped up in a couple of nice games for you. Young players like Mercer. Frankly, you start to do some of the work here around a guy. I was trying to think of guys that I was like, hey, who proved themselves? Mikey McLeod proved himself in these playoffs, right? Dougie Hamilton, some ugly moments along the way, including this last game. By the way, people getting on Luke Hughes, it's twofold here, right? Everyone's chanting Luke when he touches that puck because we're hyped and we're excited for him. We can't wait. He's 19 years old. We're putting a lot of pressure on this kid when he touches it, and he makes some mistakes, and you expect that. Far more egregious when Dougie makes those mistakes because you have a level of expectations around him. Timo Meier, injuries up and down, but I think that physicality you've liked across these. Ball has had some really good games for you. Graves has been inconsistent. The injury clearly shows up here for you, so you wonder about that. But there's just, we're learning. We're learning about the players that didn't have experience, about the veteran leadership. Now the question you start to ask is, are these guys going through growing pains that they'll learn from, or are they going through, or are we as an organization going through the learning curve of this player can do it, that player can grow, he's not going to be it for us, right? And looking at players like McLeod or Bratt, these playoffs have unfolded in a way that you go, oh, McLeod's doing it. Bratt, probably not worth that investment, right? So that's where I think I kind of turn my attention now. This has been a very sporadic episode. We've kind of touched on some things, some emotions came out, and hopefully the Devils get back on track in game number 5. That's my general thought. It was a really bad game, though. And thankfully, I got to go to Burke's in Newark ahead of the game with my cousin John. And we had a couple of drinks and we ate some sliders and got to spend some time with a friend and a family member at the game. That's what I take away after a loss like that. You move on from it and you say, I had a fun night out. Tip of the hat here, too, as we get out the door to Danny McDonough. It was his birthday yesterday, guys. If you're over on social media, give him a shout out. Happy birthday to him, because it was not a happy birthday last night, and it was absolute heck, HE double hockey stick, for him getting to the game on time. So not the celebration that he was looking for as he celebrates his 63rd birthday. He looks young, but my God, is he old. We'll be back again, obviously, ahead of game number 5. Danny and I, again, schedules and going to these games makes it a little bit trickier to give some of the covers that we want, but we're going to keep doing our thing. And we're going to keep building this. And the way that you help us do that is to get over on YouTube as you are right now. Subscribe, turn on the alerts so you know when the episodes are coming up for you. The podcast feed, by the way, go subscribe to that for us. We've been focusing on the YouTube side, especially through the playoffs, but we're going to be ramping up that content over there as well. And all of these elements matter. And then if you want, you can follow me at Adam Armbrecht over on Substack. We'll put them in the show notes for you, because I'm going to start doing some off-season article and content writing specifically around the Devils and what I want to see them accomplish. I'll also be talking Brooklyn Nets over there. I'll be talking New York Giants. It's a content outlet for me, and one that I'd love to see all you New Jersey faithful support. So those are the ways you help the show. Those are the way you help me as I try to cope with a really brutal loss in a game that I thought was going to be, a grind out battle from start to finish. And after that first goal, unfortunately, 6 unanswered the other way, a 6-1 defeat, a 3-1 series deficit, and the Devils staring at the precipice of exiting these playoffs at the hands of a quality team in the Carolina Hurricanes.